when studies have been done, and this was done at Cornell, Charlotte Young and her associates, and it was done at Oakland Naval Base, and about 20 years ago, body composition studies were done. And they compared a 90% fat diet, 90% fat, with a total fast. And they found out that the amount of body fat that was lost on the 90% fat diet was 75 to 85% more than on total fasting. That's the magnitude of the metabolic advantage. The metabolic advantage, as we use it in our low-carbohydrate diet, in my practice, comes to about, on the average, of about a pound a week. So in 6 months' time, the person loses an extra 26 pounds than he would on a diet of the same number of calories, let's say, if it were a low-fat diet or a balanced diet.
Well, let me see. Let me just. We've got to go to another break here, but let me just see if I'm up to speed on this. Now, eating the kind of diet you recommend gives a metabolic advantage of very rapid weight loss, and I have no doubt about it. It gives very rapid weight loss because of the mechanisms involved. In other words, the burning of fat and the production of ketosis, which suppresses the appetite.
Yeah.
No question about it. But the things that I want to explore when we get back are, number one, is this a lifelong diet? And number two, which is really important, which is where you have received most of your criticism, and I'm going to have to take you down point by point on this, is this a healthy diet? Because it's just the opposite of what major health organizations recommend. And I know you have answers for it because you put it in your book. I know you have. Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution has the answers to all the claims that the Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, the American Medical Association make as far as the hazards of his dietary approach. And I have a very rare privilege today, and that's to have Dr. Robert Atkins. Even though his philosophy is diametrically opposed to mine, it's a real opportunity to talk to somebody as knowledgeable and as experienced as he is in terms of helping people with dietary approach, and I'm sure there are a lot of similarities that we have in terms of going against the establishment. In fact, I know there are, having read some of his previous
books. Our philosophy is not really different. Our science is different.
Our science is different. I want to ask you something else.
Yeah.
One of the bases to your program, your dietary approach, is the production of ketosis. I mean, that's really a focal point, wouldn't you say?
Well, in some people's minds, but in those people who consider that a focal point, they're not very knowledgeable about what ketones really are.
All right, well, just a moment. I mean, ketosis has to happen for the approach that you recommend to really be effective, correct?
Well, more or less. That's
because
not 100% true. We've had people succeed on the verge of ketosis.
But generally. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to ask you, and again, another problem I have with the whole philosophy is as far as my knowledge goes, ketosis occurs naturally under two circumstances. One, when people are starving to death, and number two, when people are ill, they go into ketosis.
Well,
now,
the three, when they're on a low-carbohydrate diet.
Well, naturally, they're not on a low-carbohydrate from my point of view.
Yeah.
Now, so there are only two circumstances. In other words, what you're doing is you're trying to simulate something nature does in times of starvation or illness. So
what a bear does when he hibernates.
So would it be, well, okay, hibernation if you want. Again, that's a period of starvation.
Which is very good for an overweight person.
Would it be fair? Would it be fair to say that your diet simulates sickness?
Not at all.
Well, but that's what happens.
Sickness is where you don't feel well. My diet, people feel better than they felt in their whole adult lives.
Okay.
Because we've corrected what's been wrong with them for all these years. An unstable blood glucose, buffeted about by diets which consistently have 60% of the food as carbohydrates, something that these individuals cannot handle. And for the first time, somebody puts this carbohydrate mechanism at rest, and they feel great. And every health parameter gets better. Every health parameter gets better.
Well, they certainly lose weight. There's no question about that.
Well, I can tell you other things that certainly happen. They certainly drop their triglycerides. They certainly stabilize their blood sugar. They certainly stabilize their blood pressure. And they 95% of the time drop their cholesterol if it happens to be elevated when they start.
As you mentioned before, the same type of things would happen if somebody didn't eat at all. In other words, they fasted. So that leads me to my second question. Fasting certainly is temporary, just by definition. Mm-hmm. Is the Atkins diet, the New Diet Revolution Atkins diet, is this a permanent approach, or is this something you do?
Oh, very much so. Have you read the book yet?
I've read sections of it.
All right. Now, when we get to the part about the maintenance diet, what we're really doing is taking a principle, which is the restriction of carbohydrate, and saying, now you must find a level, the highest level of carbohydrate at which you do not regain your weight. That is your critical carbohydrate level for maintenance. That level is usually considerably higher than the one that they lose on. And this is the diet that I'm on. This is the way I go through life. And I get about 40 or 45 grams of carbohydrate, almost all of which are fresh garden vegetables of the, that I grow myself. And to me, we have a meat and vegetable diet, and the meat is the body of the diet, but the vegetables are the soul of the diet. And everything in the way of incredibly beautiful vegetables constitutes this 45 grams or whatever my level is. And this is the way I go through life, and I'm certainly healthier than I was 25 years ago when I first went on the diet. And now I'm getting up there in years, but I still play a lot of, 3 sets of singles tennis on weekends and have enough recuperative powers to work 5 days a week and still play 3 sets after a 5-day layoff.
All right, but again, you kind of lost me here a second. I thought I was in sync with what you were saying, and now you threw those vegetables in. If they're all that bad, in other words,
no, that's the 45 grams. I mean, everybody else is eating that and considering nothing, and then they're eating all these starches. I mean, remember, right now you are in sync with the feds, with the government, which I don't think is a very pleasant group to be in sync with, but you are, because now they're saying everybody should be on a low-fat diet. And they've been saying it, the message has been heard beginning in 1975. In 1975, the intake of meat went down, and fish and chicken went up, and skim milk went up, and whole milk went down. But during those 15 years, the per capita consumption of sugar jumped 20 pounds per annum per person. Now, that's the way people are hearing that low-fat message. I know you wouldn't give a message like that because you're not going to let people have sugar. But when you take away their fats, you force them, and those who are vulnerable to sugar craving give in to it. And the per capita figures show it. U.S. Department of Agriculture shows how much we've jumped our sugar intake, and we had it under control for about 3 decades. Now, this is what frightens me. It doesn't frighten me what you're saying. It frightens me what very naive people such as the government, who really doesn't know nutrition from an auto car. I mean, they know nothing, and they've got a food labeling now which says, yeah, it's okay. Jelly beans could be labeled as health food because they're low in fat.
Well, we certainly agree on that. There's
no
question about that at all. But what I want to do is after we come back from this commercial break, I really want to talk about some of the things that I know you have dealt with many, many times before, and I'm sure you've got good answers for us. Things like heart disease and cholesterol, things like excess protein in the diet and the damage from that. Because, I know your approach works. I know people lose weight, and I don't doubt that they feel better, and I don't doubt that some of the parameters come in line. But is this good health, or are we just looking at improved signs? I'm a little worried about that. This is Dr. John McDougall on the Northern California Radio Network. Dr. Atkins and I will be back with you in just a moment. And what you should have heard so far is there are 2 approaches to problems that give, in some ways, similar results. In other words, you can eat all you want of either meat or carbohydrate. Both programs offer excellent weight loss, and I have no doubt of that. And I also wouldn't doubt the fact that Dr. Atkins' approach also results in the changes in the signs associated with heart disease, like he says, in other words, a decreased blood pressure, a decrease in cholesterol levels, decreased triglycerides for sure, and probably a decrease in blood sugar level. But the question we have to address right now, Dr. Atkins, and I know you've addressed it many, many, many times before, are you getting good health with the diet of all meat, full of cholesterol, no fiber?
We sure are. I mean, remarkably good health. I mean, it certainly seems that way, but I can't prove it because for this would mean doing a prospective study. But let's just look at the risk factors for heart disease that get better on the diet.
Before we do that, we already kind of addressed it. Before we do that, could we just look at some populations of people who have eaten a diet similar to yours? Do you know of any population of people who's done such?
No, there aren't any, really.
Well, how about
unless you want to talk about the Eskimos.
Yeah, how about the Eskimos? Wouldn't that be a good example?
Well, yes and no. I mean, all they're eating is marine mammals, and the amount of EPA in marine mammals, it actually changes the picture so much that, I mean, and plus no nutritional supplements.
Well, would it be fair
It's so different. I don't think it's... an Eskimo diet and my diet are completely different.
Well,
I'm sitting there eating rack of lamb and lobster and drawn butter. And
how about animal protein content? Would you say that was similar between the Atkins diet and the Eskimo diet? I mean, how many
perhaps
grams?
in that one way.
Okay,
Yeah.
how many grams of protein per day in your diet?
I have no idea. It depends on the.
Well-
See, some people can eat. They're allowed to eat as much as they want, and therefore some people are going to eat 4,000 calories a day, and other people are going to eat about 1,400.
Well, would it be fair to say that some of your people that you claim to be in excellent health consume between 250 and 400 grams of protein a day, which is similar to the Eskimo?
I don't know about that much protein. Certainly,
Well, I could calculate it out, and I'm sure that's what it would be.
perhaps some of the unusual people.
All right, now let me ask you this. Are you aware that the Eskimo has the highest incidence of osteoporosis in the world, which is a direct consequence of eating all that animal protein?
Well, we don't know what it's a consequence of. I mean, they have such a restricted diet and no nutritional supplements, and it's such a strange thing to say that in some ways the diet is like the Eskimo diet, but in point of fact, it isn't anything like that.
Well, then let me take you one step further, and let me see if I can get to my point.
Yeah.
The issue is that worldwide, animal protein content is directly correlated with osteoporosis incidence and also kidney stone formation, which is believed to be, and I certainly believe it strongly, to be a consequence of all that animal protein intake. Are you aware of that research?
Well, but you take any kind of an epidemiologic study, and what you try to select out the protein part of it. But remember, the wherever a culture is high in animal foods, they're also high in sugar. There are very few cultures which are disparate, where the sugar intake is low and the protein intake is high.
Well,
therefore, all the epidemiology could prove your point or my point.
Well, how about
it can't be used to make a distinction.
How about all the human and animal research that directly looks at that issue and finds that high-protein diets encourage calcium loss and osteoporosis?
Yeah, but those are all short-term studies, too. After about 6 weeks, they re-equilibrated. That was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition.
Not according to the research that I read. This is a long-term thing, and it's directly a consequence of fish and beef and chicken and other kinds of protein. So we've got the animal research.
Well, one thing we know, we're not seeing osteoporosis.
Well,
we simply are not seeing it in our group.
Well, you just told me you don't have long-term enough evaluations to see it.
I would certainly, after 40,000 patients, I would have seen a few cases of osteoporosis, considering how prevalent it is in the general population.
You mean in 40,000 people you don't have a single case of osteoporosis?
No, I'm not saying we don't have a single case, but I'm saying it is absolutely rare, extremely rare. I mean, I get the sense of the fact that this cannot be a problem because I would be seeing it.
The second thing is when it comes to protein and osteoporosis, the mechanisms have been worked out in terms of renal tubular reabsorption, in terms of diuretic effect, in terms of hydrogen ions, and so on. Would you explain the mechanism involved in sugar and osteoporosis?
Well, I haven't really considered the sugar and osteoporosis, except that it works through hormonal balances. One thing we know is that the high carbohydrate and high sugar diets will create certain hormonal problems in women. That's why the women on the high sugar diets are more likely to get breast cancer, more likely to get endometrial cancer. They've all been correlated. There have been correlations between breast, ovarian, and endometrial cancer with such parameters as high birth weight babies, which is a sign of diabetic tendency, with high triglycerides. They've been correlated, and with high insulin levels.
You brought up the sugar and cancer relationship. How come it is that you, and you alone, as far as I know, maybe Yudkin in England, but you and you alone have come to that conclusion, and otherwise the American Cancer Society, the National Cancer Institute, the Surgeon General of the United States, and so on have not implicated sugar, but they've implicated fat. Why is it they've come to that conclusion and you haven't?
Do you know how to spell the word crooked? I think you better. Let me just tell you how crooked that is. Now, you know about that nurses study at Harvard.
Sure I do.
All right.
But I'm going to...
You know what their data really show, and I've studied both of the articles in the New England Journal, that those on the low-fat diet, the quintile with the lowest fat intake, had 25% more breast cancer than all the other four quintiles.
Yeah, they also ate a modification of the American diet. I'm going to have to hold you right here because, again, sad to say, the commercial adventure of this is real. This is Dr. John McDougall on the Northern California Radio Network, and my guest is Dr. Robert Atkins.